Hey, welcome back. Okay, so there are two more parts of your essay, the evaluation and the conclusion. Now, for your evaluation, if you are doing more than one criticism, you don't have to write more than one paragraph because you'll be able to incorporate that into your warrant. So really, we just need one of these paragraphs regardless of how you're sort of attacking this essay. Okay, so now for your claim, you're going to say a sophisticated or unsophisticated, who's whatever critic would evaluate the story, would like the story, dislike the story, find the story interesting, like most of the story, not care for all the story, but really like the ending, whatever, okay? That's how they're going to feel about the story. Now I need two quotes to prove that's correct, especially if you're going to say something like, well, they're not going to like the beginning, but they're really going to like the end, okay, or something like that. So you'll have two quotes now with a transition between the two that explain or show evidence or examples for why they are going to like or dislike the whole story or parts of the story. So let's say you're going to say this critic is going to like hate the whole story or love the whole story. You'll find two parts that really show like that kind of inequality or equality that they're looking for. Let's say that you say they like this part but hate this part. You're going to say whichever one you put first in your claim, you'll say like they like this part and here's a quote for why, or they wouldn't like this part and here's a quote for why. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to give you an example going back to why women always get what they want or why women always take advantage of men. So like let's say that our claim for why women always take advantage of men would be that a sophisticated matriarchal critic would find the whole story interesting, but particularly like the ending or something. So why is she going to find the whole story interesting? So you would say like, in the beginning of the story, men and women are equal, but the man gets power over the woman first. And then what I would do is I would put that quote and I would say like, oh, like this is the part where like, man, I'm just making this up, like man gets his strength from, you know, God or whatever. Okay, but you would actually put the quote in the story that says that. I don't have the story right in front of me, so I'm not putting a direct quote. Okay, but you would in your essay, and then, you know, that would be like blah, 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 and it would be like Hurston, and I'm making it the page number 2, page 126 or something. And then you put the period on the outside, which is the proper way to do a parenthetical citation. Okay, so then you transition to another quote by saying, this quote, okay, you would just say like a transitional word like another quote from the story shows why the matriarchal critic would love the ending or something. And you would say like, by this time in the story, woman has figured out how to get power back over the man. And then you would have a quote that shows how something like blah, 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 keys, blah, 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 whatever. Hurston, page, let's say 126 again. Okay, now in your warrant, you're going to say like the first quotation would be blah, 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 blah. The second quotation means blah, 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 blah. Then talk about how an unsophisticated critic. Now here's your part. Like if you've used two different criticisms, here's the part where instead of talking about an unsophisticated critic, you might say like, although a patriarchal critic would really like the beginning for these reasons, a matriarchal critic is really going to like the ending, or you know, whatever. So you can talk to me. If you have individual questions, if you did something more complicated, just come talk to me. For most of you, you're just doing one criticism. So for most of you, you're going to say, whether if you're a sophisticated critic in your thesis statement, this is how a sophisticated critic would interpret these quotations. If you're an unsophisticated critic in your thesis, you're going to say this is how an unsophisticated critic would interpret your quotations. That's what you do for this one. For the next one, you're going to do the opposite interpretation. The other kind of critic, the other kind of matriarchal critic, or the other kind of patriarchal critic would interpret these quotes this way. Why is your first interpretation, like this one, better than the second interpretation you just went over? You could then include a real-life example but it's not required, but you could to make sure you get that A. And then finally, you need to explain either in a separate sentence at the end or within your interpretations why each critic would feel like they do. Okay? So overall, what we've done here is the focus of this paragraph has been how would your thesis statement critic, whatever you said in your thesis statement, how would that person evaluate, judge, like, dislike, you know, whatever makes sense to you, this story, and why? Okay, so total so far you have 3 quotes from your story. Does that make sense? You can't answer me. Why do I keep asking that? Okay, so good. Hopefully that made sense. Ask other people or ask me or Mr. Dupuy if you have any questions. Thank you very much. I'm just going over conclusion for that last video. Okay.